I know that I have quite a few questions based on those presentations, but I thought we should throw it over to you guys if anyone has one. Anyone got a question for our panel? Yes, sir. I think we've got a microphone coming. If you could just introduce yourself first.
Thanks. Matt Wasim from Union Adelaide. My question for Caecilia was about green infrastructure and whether you looked at that as the environment there.
Yes, we did. So it's quite interesting to see, like an area like Victoria Square always showed up as a cool area surrounded by housing. So the temperatures around there, we've got temperature sensors in Flinders Street and in some other adjacent areas. But Victoria Square showed up as the green area. If you go further into the Quarry Street, Rundle Mall area, because of the high buildings there, the temperature is very much higher compared to there. And it was, as I said before, really interesting to see that at some nights, especially at night, so let's say just before sunrise in the morning, the temperature got up to 6-degree difference between Parklands and this area around Quarry Street. So the different green areas definitely are a matter of adaptation to this rising temperature. What we didn't show yet, or what I couldn't show today because of the short time frame, is what these parklands which surround the CBD, what this effect of the parkland actually is on the CBD. Maybe we do see lower temperatures in the CBD already because the parklands already mitigate some of the changes. Because if you go to other cities, I think I remember studying in Athens where they do have 10 degrees difference. And that is dramatic, 10 degrees between rural areas or green areas and the city itself. And so maybe our parklands are actually located very well, which means we should maintain the parklands.
Thanks, Caecilia. Mark. Go with Mark and then Wayne, you're next.
Thanks very much. Mark was Eric. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's enjoyed this. One of the challenges that we face talking to clients and when trying to communicate around adaptation is around what resilient infrastructure and buildings actually look like. So Stephen, I enjoyed your presentation and I've spoken also previously about oil and gas designs there. But this notion of what does resilient infrastructure look like? I put to you that it's not necessarily green buildings, it's not necessarily energy efficient buildings, but what is it? And that's what we need to get to in terms of understanding the robustness of infrastructure and of the buildings. And I note the model around the roads, for example, the replacement. One of the challenges is how do we know that the replacement infrastructure is actually going to be more resilient than the current infrastructure? I guess I'll point to the example of what's happening in Queensland at the moment, where roads that have been destroyed due to major extreme events are being replaced like for like because of insurance requirements with existing design standards. And so, what's you, is that resilient? So it's a question, I guess, about communicating what resilience is in this space around built form and infrastructure. And I think there's some work to be done around the design standards and the way these are funded. Interested in this.
Who wants to take that?
I can start off.
Yeah, sure. Stephen?
I think the research we're doing on housing, Mark, sort of suggests that we've got to look at houses somewhat differently. I think at the moment we look at the house, that's where we live during very hot, very cold conditions. We have sort of entertaining areas outside, and then we have the rest of the garden, perhaps that would be typical. In other words, basically three zones to cater currently for our climate. I think what this work is showing is that we've actually got to have 4 zones. We might go back to 3 if the garden's abandoned, of course, but taking up the previous example, we've got the garden, the outdoor living area, indoors, and then the retreat area. And I think that will build in resilience into houses to cope with the more adverse conditions that may be coming in the future.
Thanks, Stephen. Did you want to add?
Just very quickly, certainly I support your concept that there's a difference between energy efficiency and design to protect against climate change. But even if we look at the context of heat waves, we have seen many houses which are energy efficient, in other words, over the whole year use less energy, but at the same time perform terribly during heat waves and need huge amounts of air conditioning. So we need to watch out for both in a separate way, and also we need to make sure that these aspects are covered in future codes. And certainly this is one of the outcomes expected of our project.
Jackie, I think you might add to that.
With respect to the engineering of the roads, the study that we looked at, as I pointed out, considered only the median change in the climate, which was a function of temperature and rainfall, because they're the two climate parameters that are in the road models, the engineering models. So it doesn't take into account extreme events that you're referring to in Queensland. Generally, when we looked at the standards that apply to roads currently, they're well built. I mean, they're over-engineered in a sense, and research has been continuing into the seal types. In fact, it was very difficult to get long-term data on any particular road type, because the research that's going into the development of roads is continuing, and there aren't many roads that have exactly the same seal over more than 10-year period. So I think the engineering component from that perspective, resilience to standard climate, is good, and it's continuing. The research is keeping ahead of the climate, if you like. When it comes to extreme events, that's perhaps a different matter. And certainly that concept of whether we continue to build the same type of infrastructure in the same place is probably a question of retreat. Do we continue to have this particular type of infrastructure in this location? And interestingly, with the coastal study as well, when we looked at the type of infrastructure that's the first thought in the minds of many decision makers is to protect the infrastructure, in other words, build a hard wall, a sea wall along the coast. That decision to do that is firstly very expensive. It tends to be inflexible in the sense that it's very difficult to change that decision once you've gone down that path. And in many cases it carries with it a lot of legal ramifications that put that organisation, in this case council, at risk from legal implications that would not have applied had they not tried to protect a particular settlement and left it to its natural devices. So there's a whole range of questions there that have to be considered when we think about whether we replace a particular infrastructure